Hey, keep dropping stuff in the chat. I'm going to get us kicked off here. As I mentioned, my name is Alexa Nada. I am one of the co-founders and the COO of Rent Responsibly. If you've never heard of Rent Responsibly, welcome. You're in good company. We provide all sorts of community building and education resources for operators of all kinds. And especially if you are a first-time host on the World Cup, this is exactly where you want to be. Here's what we're going to cover today in this session that is specifically for all of these southern host cities for the World Cup. If you hosted multiple, especially ones in other regions, don't worry. We've got more for you guys over the next couple days as well. But we're going to get started.
Good morning. I'm Jacqueline. We have Sophie pulling up our slideshow real quick. But my name is Jacqueline Turway. I am the regional manager of government affairs with Expedia Group, and I will let my colleague Elena hop on and introduce herself as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. Elena Dahlquist with Expedia Group's Government Affairs as well, representing some states in the South. So I will get us kicked off today. Jacqueline and I will go back and forth going through some of the regulations in these host cities. So, yep, here we have the agenda for you guys. So, some information on where to find your short-term rental requirements. We'll run through each host cities and sort of surrounding areas, local regulations, and then just wrap it up at the end with some best practices and reminders for responsible hosting. So just friendly reminder to everyone, in addition, to whatever we share today, the best information you're going to get is directly from whatever city, county, local website and ordinance directly on what these regulations look like and what your tax requirements look like as hosts. So, and just expect, like we always see with these major events, expect sort of extra enforcement and scrutiny to enforce all these different regulations as well. One more, I think. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'll kick it off. We'll start off with Atlanta. So Atlanta is set to host 8 different matches at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is going to include one semifinal match. Ordinance 20-0-1656 is the current law that governs short-term rentals in the city of Atlanta. All short-term rentals in the city must be correctly licensed and registered, and hosts are required to pay an annual fee of $150. A City of Atlanta short-term rental license must be displayed on all advertisements. So these licenses can be obtained by either a short-term rental owner or the long-term tenant of a short-term rental for their primary residence and one additional dwelling unit without any sort of additional requirements, fees, permits, licensing, etc. for that extra dwelling. So any sort of interested residents can use the city's property lookup tool to see if their address falls within city limits. And then from there, any eligible owners can complete an application for a short-term rental license directly through the city's online permitting portal. These are available on a daily basis, sort of continual and rolling throughout the year. So there's no deadline for submission. The city's website also has a lot of additional videos, resources, educational materials regarding the different requirements and the application process for getting licensed. And residents, if you do type it in and see that you fall outside of the city limits, residents obviously living outside of the limits should check their applicable locality short-term rental policies, as requirements, especially in the Atlanta metro area, vary, from one locality to another. Then I'll kick it back to Jacqueline for Texas.
Hi. So, Dallas is a host of some World Cup matches, technically Arlington because it is at AT&T Stadium. But we have the city of Dallas recently imposed a new short-term rental ordinance in the summer of 2023, which, as this states, was a court injunction blocked enforcement of the new zoning restrictions. They would have denied any short-term rental permits in residential areas and significantly reduced the amount that you could have in commercial properties as well. So the city is continuing to enforce the existing ordinances that have the minimum property standards, the disturbing noises, and the private nuisances. But the ordinance that was passed in 2023 is still somewhat on hold as it moves through the court system right now. The city of Arlington, as I said, is where the actual stadium is, does allow short-term rentals, but only in certain zones. So in the link that is provided um, on this presentation, you can go in and actually zoom in and see that if your property is within one of the zones that is allowed to have a short-term rental or not. But they are very dispersed throughout city limits in Arlington. As well, Fort Worth is another one that's very close to the city of Arlington. Short-term rentals are banned in all residential zones of the city. You can have them in commercial areas, mixed use areas, and form-based commercial and industrial zones. So you can go on and search on the Fort Worth website as well to see if your property is included in an area that can have a short-term rental property. Recently, the city of Houston implemented a short-term rental ordinance as well. So the city of Houston will be hosting World Cup matches at the NRG Stadium, including one on the July 4th weekend. So that should be fun for a round of 16 game. Really grab some attention. But so the city of Houston did recently do the short-term rental ordinance, which went into effect on January 1st of 2026. They built their system from scratch. So they did not have a registration or a registration portal or anything like that. So all of it is brand new. They have had a large influx of registrations coming through their application process, which has slowed some of their approval process down. And so I will say that they have come to us and also announced on their website that the mandatory field and takedown portion of the City of Houston's ordinance, which is the platform requirements in that bill, will not go into effect until December 31st of this year. So they will not start enforcing the platform ordinance piece until after the World Cup takes place. They wanted to make sure that that is shared out with their partners and hosts in the area because they want people to get their registration and get their orders in effect, but they also want to make sure that they're not being punitive in a way that keeps people from operating their short-term rentals. So STRs in Houston must hold a valid registration, and a separate certificate of the registration is required for each short-term rental. One that's not on here that I did just want to quickly mention though too is the city of Austin recently updated their short-term rental registration process. Their new website should be up and running by the end of May, but their ordinance is in effect and their platform ordinance should be taking place in July of this year. But this one is actually expanding the amount of short-term rentals that are allowed in the city of Austin. And they are still taking registration applications through their current website. So if you are an Austin STR owner who does not have their license currently, I would encourage you to go to the City of Austin's website and get your license and registration taken care of and posted on your platform's page. I think, that one I'm mentioning because it is so close to both Houston and Dallas and is a destination site for people who are coming to visit internationally. So back to you, Elena.
Thank you. Next, we'll do Kansas City, Missouri. So Kansas City set to host 6 different matches at Arrowhead Stadium, including a quarterfinal match. Short-term rentals in Kansas City have to hold a valid permit and are divided into 2 different categories, resident and non-resident, and hosts must pay an annual registration fee of $200. So non-resident short-term rentals that were not previously grandfathered in can only operate in commercial zones, and those ones are subject to a density cap. Interested residents can use the city's short-term rental checklist as a reference guide for all necessary steps in properly registering their property. and eligible hosts can complete an application for a short-term rental license directly through the city's online portal as well. And something significant and of note, Kansas City recently passed a major event short-term rental registration ordinance for hosts that are wishing to just rent solely during the World Cup window. So those permits are going to be valid from May 3rd through July 31st. And applications for these special event permits are now open, and eligible hosts can register for a reduced rate of $50 as opposed to that other $200. So on their website, which is linked out here, you can find additional information on, short-term rental frequently asked questions, further explanations on those different types of permits, and information on short-term rental taxation as well. And last but not least, we have the Miami area. So Miami's set to host seven different matches at Hard Rock, including a bronze final match. Miami has very different short-term rental rules and regulations depending on what area you're in, and they're pretty notorious for having sort of copious amounts of requirements and really strict enforcement. So all vacation rentals in the state of Florida must be licensed through the state's Department of Business and Professional Regulation. And full standards and requirements for the short-term rentals can be found in Section 33-28 of the Miami-Dade Code, which is available on the county website. Additionally, sort of third layer to these requirements, owners are responsible for complying with the regulations of their respective municipal government as well. So we'll take a look at a few of these that are in sort of the area. So first, City of Miami short-term rentals in the city must obtain a certificate of use from the city to operate and are significantly restricted based on different zoning requirements. Short-term rentals are only allowed in structures that are approved by the city's building department for lodging in specific transit zones. Next, we have City of Miami Beach, which is a little bit different. Short-term rentals there must obtain a certificate of use and a resort tax registration from the city as well. Short-term rentals are prohibited in all single-family homes and in multifamily housing buildings in certain zoning districts of Miami Beach. Of note, the city has aggressive code enforcement that has evicted guests from unpermitted properties in the past. And last but not least, City of Miami Gardens, short-term rentals there must hold a valid registration, and each rental unit requires a separate application as well. I'll give it back to Jacqueline just to finish us up here.
Yeah, so I know there have been a lot of questions and comments in the chat about additional ordinances or statutes or things like that. This is a link, gameon2026.rentresponsibly.org has local guides, house rules, message templates, and more additional city things to look at and find out if you are following your code compliance and making sure that you have the appropriate ordinances and statutes to make sure that you are operating in compliance with your local laws. I would also encourage you to find and connect with your local alliance. So whether it's the Missouri Alliance, the Texas Alliance, wherever you are, find that alliance and connect with them, because they are, as you saw, the Seb and others in the chat have some insider information on what they are communicating with their local legislators and local contacts. So making sure that you're connected with them, because they will have the most up-to-date information as to how to comply with those local laws. So we really appreciate the time that you guys gave us today, and good luck with everything moving forward.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Thanks, Elena. I was going to say the exact same thing. You can see in the chat, we've got some additional experts here from each of the local or state associations representing all of the host cities in the South. They are huge wealth of information. They're going to be on a panel later, so stick around. And there's Dennis right there. Between the two folks on the screen here, everybody in the chat, there are a ton of resources out there for you if you've got questions. If we were going to talk about state and county here, it'd take us the whole 2 hours. So there's that. There's also your HOA. Check your HOA. Check your COA. There's no shortage of regulations. Just makes everything so much fun, right? All right. On that note, that is the segue into my next session here. Let me get my screen shared for you. we talk about regulations all day, every day. And one of the most common questions that we get back is, how do we get guests to follow the rules? How do we talk about these types of things with guests, the things that they need to know without putting them off, especially before booking, right? So I didn't mention this at the start, but I have a background in property management. And especially as a director of marketing at a couple different companies, I had to answer this question for myself, or these questions for myself, and come up with some ways to balance being friendly but also firm with guests, to make sure they knew what they needed to know and were following the rules, but without, seeming like a really mean, angry host. So throughout this deck, you'll see communications that I have used in practice. You're welcome to copy and paste them. That's what they're here for. So let's jump in. Some of the most common, if not the three most common things that trigger regulatory discussions, or at least send people to City Hall to complain about short-term rentals, are trash, parking, and noise. It's hopefully understandable why this would really bother your neighbors. I will also say these are three headaches that, as a host, we don't want to deal with either, and your guests don't want to deal with these things either. So why not prevent these headaches for everybody, whether or not these things are already regulated in not just your short-term rental ordinances, but your local nuisance ordinances as well. So check out those separate parts of your code. Talk to your city about what the rules are, because there are rules on the book. As you can imagine with trash, for example, improperly managed trash, it also just makes your property look bad, and it attracts pests, creates some expensive problems. Parking is going to be a big one for the World Cup and for big destination events of any kind, especially for the World Cup. And we know that 74% of international visitors are bringing kids. And then a lot of people are traveling with a group, and groups tend to prefer vacation rentals. So that means you may be more likely to have lots of cars coming to your property, and you may or may not have the space to accommodate them. So let's address that in advance. And then noise, as you can imagine, noise is the biggest complaint from neighbors. When you're at home enjoying your property, you probably don't enjoy hearing excess noise from others around you yourself. So we're going to talk about some guest communication tips to help curb these things. Like I mentioned, one of the top 2, 3, 4 FAQs that we get from hosts is, how do I answer tough questions from guests without losing a booking? And then during the stay, how do I communicate house rules and other things without sounding, like one of those helicopter hosts that ends up on the internet as a meme, or getting a bad review? So that led me to the S.P.R.I.N.K.L.E method. These are 8 strategies for communicating house rules and answers to FAQs in a friendly but firm way. So first step, the S stands for succinct. Keep your messaging concise so that the important stuff doesn't get lost or buried. How many times have you received a wall of text that you're just like, I'm not going to read that? Your guests are like that too. So make things really compact, easy to read. For example, if you have a house rule or some parking requirements, keep it simple and say, our driveway, or whatever your parking situation is, can accommodate up to X number of vehicles. If you need more parking, here's where you can find it. Super easy. Again, throughout, I have a whole bunch of copy and paste stuff for you. Lindsay's going to drop that into the chat at the end of my segment. So you will literally be able to copy and paste the things that I'm sharing. The P stands for professional. So even if this is your first time hosting, even if you're only doing it as a hobby around big events, you want to make sure your tone is business casual and well polished. So have a friend who's good with writing, review your stuff. Most of the communication with your guests is going to be in writing. Another FAQ, can I book your home for someone else, a relative, a friend, a coworker? You can say something like, thank you for considering our property, such and such OTA, and our insurance policy prohibit third-party bookings, but we'd be happy to host your friend, your colleague, whomever, if they book themselves. You want to make sure that When you're communicating, again, you are being warm and hospitable, but you are also going to be expected to be a professional host. So make sure your communication reflects that. At the same time, you want to be relatable. Find something to agree with or connect with your guests about. For example, if you have a house rule that says no pets, don't make it seem like you hate dogs. People with dogs probably won't like that. So you can say something like, we love pets. Unfortunately, due to the severe allergies of a family member, we are unable to host your furry family members. Maybe that last bit's a little too kitschy for you. So of course, change this to suit your needs, but that is a way to deliver that information. Be instructive, that's the I. If you need guests to do something or not do something specific, make sure your directions for that thing are really, really clear. So for example, if you've got a hot tub or a spa, whatever you call it, make sure you are specifying the hours they can use it. A lot of places may limit hot tub use to certain times of day for noise reasons primarily. If you need them to rinse off before using it, tell them that. Be very specific. Tell them if there's a shower for them to use to do so. Keep glass away from the hot tub. The home is stocked with a set of pool-safe drinkware, whatever you provide. These are all, of course, examples, but just be this level of instructive with whatever it is you are asking guests to do or not do. Oh, the no but rule. This is one of my favorites. My team here knows we use this in all of the work that we do. When you have to say no to a request or a question, make that no clear, final, non-negotiable, but offer an alternative. For example, if someone asks if they can host a party at your house, first of all, wouldn't it be lovely if they asked in advance? You can say, that sounds like a fun trip. We don't host parties or group events, like the end, no questions about that. But take a look at such and such event venue down the street or such and such accommodations that do allow parties. They could be a great fit. You're saying no to a party at your place, but you're being really helpful and hospitable by giving them an alternative recommendation. The K is keep things easy. Don't make it hard for guests to follow your rules, otherwise they're not going to do it. So for example, if you say you don't want pets on the furniture, make it easy for them to stay off the furniture. For example, give or provide dog beds for the guests who are bringing dogs into the property. If you really want guests to recycle or require guests to recycle, don't stick the recycling bin out, behind the house or in the garage. Put it right next to your trash can where they're already disposing of stuff so they can easily sort things and put things in the proper place. Another really good one is leverage the law and other limitations. So when there are things that guests are required to do or not do, that is not something you made up. It's something that's required by your HOA or your county or whomever. Deflect to those rules, lean on them. They don't shoot the messenger. This is a city requirement. So for example, if somebody asks if they can have extra people, they'd be fine sleeping on the couch or an airbed. That's lovely, but you can say, we would love to accommodate more people, but local law limits this home to X number of people. The town, the city, whichever agency will issue a fine for over occupancy or whatever the penalty is. We recommend nearby property for hosting additional guests. So this is another example of the no but. This is another example of being firm but friendly. So you should start to see some of these things overlapping, these strategies overlapping with each other. And the E is for effective delivery. You don't want to blast all of this stuff at your guests in the listing or only when they're arriving on site. That's just an overwhelming amount of information and it's not where they need to find it. So there are certain things that you should put in your listing, for example, like parking and quiet hours and things like that, that they're going to need to be aware of to make sure that your property is right for them and vice versa. In your rental agreement, you want to include those policies, again, noise, parking, trash, make sure they are reading them, acknowledging them. And if you want, I would recommend having a separate agreement for the World Cup period. I recommend this, in other places like around Coachella have a festival agreement. It's just an added layer and stressing of importance of these things to your guests, that these things really are very important. Pre-stay, remind your guests about parking and noise. This is when you're delivering helpful local travel information. And this is probably when they are planning things like their rental car reservations. So drip that information to them at that point. And then on-site, provide helpful information in your on-site signage and your guest book. So up until this point, you've only been communicating with the person who has booked the property. This is your one chance to communicate with everybody else on the reservation as well. So it seems like a lot, but sprinkle it across all these things. That's why the acronym is what it is. And it will be seen as more helpful to your guests as opposed to being, like I said, a helicopter host that really wants to control everything or seem like a nag. So here's the acronym again: be succinct, be professional, but also relatable. Use or be instructive, use the no but rule, keep things easy, leverage the law, and use effective delivery. So Lindsay on my team is going to drop some resources for you. We have templates for house rules, for guest communication, for all sorts of things. And she just put it in the chat for me. Thank you, Lindsay. That's all inside the Rent Responsibly Network, free to join, tons of resources in there. Sign in and go to the articles and guides section. There's also a whole separate library I recommend as well. But if you're looking for stuff from this specific presentation, go there first and you'll find all those things that I just mentioned. Okay. With that, I'm going to bring up some friends from Proper, Avalara, and Truvi for the defense line, minimizing the risk of major losses. So whoops, hold on. Let me stop my share and switch over. All right. Hi, Ian. Hi, Max. Hi, Humphrey. Nice to see you guys. Welcome back.
Hello.
For those of you who have been or who came to our kickoff event, you saw detailed presentations from Max, Humphrey, and Ian's teammate, Nick. This is a follow-up conversation, and we're going to chat about a little bit more. So let's start first with some quick introductions. I'm going to go in the order of my screen. So Max, Humphrey, and then Ian, introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your companies.
Hi there, I'm Max Fountain. I'm with Avalara, and we specialize in lodging taxes. Everyone's favorite thing in the world is taxes, right? Let's just be honest here. So we make it a little bit easier for folks when it comes to compliance in total. I know the Expedia team talked a lot about permitting. We know a lot about that, as well as filing taxes. I myself am from the Orlando area, the South region representing. And I'm actually excited for the World Cup. I am a England supporter, and I'm actually going to a friendly match in 2 months in June against Costa Rica. Super excited.
Jealous. I'm jealous. Humphrey?
I mean, I am so jealous given I'm a Brit and I can't even afford the tickets. So I'm Humphrey Bowles. I'm founder and CEO of Truvi. We do guest screening and risk management for short-term rental operators. We work across every booking channel, including direct, and we really try and help make sure that the wrong guests don't get access to your properties. And that goes into kind of one of the topics which I'm most passionate about, which is helping reduce sex trafficking through short-term rentals. So kind of part of the reason I built Truvi was because I got quite angry about what's going on in the industry and how people are using our kind of properties for this type of thing. And we are part of the solution to that.
Thanks, Humphrey. It's really, really important work that you guys are doing. Ian, welcome.
Hi. Yeah, my name's Ian Smith. I'm National Sales Manager at Proper Insurance. We started a STR program 11, 12 years ago that fully replaces your homeowner's insurance, encompassing your standard natural losses, wind, hail, fire, water damage, with the exposure of business liability in the short-term rental space. That gets issued with commercial general liability, and it fills a lot of those gaps that you see out there utilizing personal liability, premises liability, truly providing a massive upgrade and transferring as much risk as you can to an insurance policy. It's been a very educational process. Everybody across the nation has access to different types of insurance, and sometimes there's a learning curve, and there's a lot of trust that people have with their insurance agent, and it's really important that you understand, it's contractual and the information is actually in the policy. So if you're looking to transfer as much risk as you can to an insurance policy to protect your business and your home, your family, it's important to dive in and figure out what you really have.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well said. Well, the reason you guys are all here is because hopefully everybody on this call knows that short-term renting always carries some level of risk. Everything carries some level of risk, right? But the World Cup and big destination events like it aren't normal hosting conditions. These are, for a lot of people, once in a lifetime trips. They are high emotion. They're staying longer, bringing more people. They're spending almost twice as much. So from your perspective, how does this all change a host liability? Humphrey, let me throw that one to you first.
Oh, I mean, it's a good question, Alex. It's really difficult to quantify what a host liability is and isn't, straight off the bat. I think the most important thing is to be able to look at the process that you've gone through in order to take a decision, and then look at the pushback that could be given to you based on that. And if you think that based on what you've done, you could defend yourself, you've probably done enough. And if you think that actually you've discovered some holes, then you do want to take steps to actively manage those holes. Now, the great thing is you just want to document everything. Like, I know it sounds geeky, but the more you document, hello, Claude, the more you're going to be able to say, I thought about it and I've taken steps against it. And then the more that you can then get your guests to buy into that process, the more you will actually then be covering your backside should the worst thing happen. So it's look, you never know when something's going to go wrong. Okay. And that's the straight whiskey. And it's probably when you least expect it. If you document it and then go above and beyond, you're putting yourself into the best position to be able to push back against someone.
Not agree more. I'm a big keep the receipts person. Nobody would like to see the shape of my inbox because I don't delete a single thing. Ian, how about you? How does this change a host liability from the insurance perspective?
I mean, it's as a property owner, or a host, if you have an insurable interest in the booking that's taking place, somebody gets hurt, they hire a personal injury attorney. Most of the demand letters that I've seen, they list anybody that's involved on that demand letter, and the property that it took place on is typically the insurance that's going to respond. Having the right liability in a situation like this, I would consider, people are going to be consuming alcohol. So, that the ability to, walking through the home, getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to use the restroom in a home that they're not familiar with, slips and falls, pools, late night hot tubs, the exposure is just there. And regardless, however, I have a client who's an attorney, a personal injury attorney, and I asked him, I was like, why do you buy insurance? Like, you're a personal injury attorney. And he goes, Ian, no matter what is in any agreement, you can't waive negligence. And he goes, that's why I buy good insurance. And that always resonated with me, and so you want to make sure that you have that line of defense, because you want to protect yourself from a catastrophic loss, and we do live in a litigious society, and that scope varies. If I slip and fall down the stairs because I've had a couple scotches, right? I'm not the type of person who's gonna sue the homeowner that I've been in, but not everybody's like me, a reasonable and responsible person. That definition can be separated out between 52 people for every 52 weekends that you're booking out throughout the year. And there could be one bad one in that 52 weeks. whose uncle is a fantastic attorney, and it's a money grab. You need defensibility, from that.
They've always got some uncle who's an attorney. Everybody does. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And then when they're on vacation, everybody's got vacation brain. So the stuff that you wouldn't normally expect on a regular day, crazy things will happen on vacation. Max, how about you?
From the tax side of it, when it comes to liability, that doesn't change whether it's a special event or it doesn't, and I think this is where it's kind of really important for people who are first-time hosts to kind of realize that when it comes to taxes, if you are renting a property and the taxes are passed over to you, it's your responsibility to file them. Now, breaking down lodging taxes for those who don't know, it's essentially the tax that your guest pays when they book the property. And in some situations, the taxes are passed over to you, and then it's your responsibility to pay them to the state, county, city, whatever's applicable. So in most cases, regardless, you still need to be filing something, whether it's during the World Cup or not. And being a special event is not an excuse. And I will say a lot of these jurisdictions, because of the high demand, are going to be even more scrutinous on what they're doing to be able to find listings that aren't in compliance, whether that's the registration requirements that the Expedia team had talked about before, or even just the filing and remission of the taxes, because they utilize technologies that scrape Airbnb and VRBO and Booking.com and all these other fun sites in order to be able to find listings that aren't in compliance. And if they find you, you will get a letter in the mail and you will find out. I know, as the Expedia team talked about, Miami Beach is one of the strictest ones inside of the entire market. And staying on top of that is super, super important, as well as other areas, Kansas City, where people might think that everything's being filed for them. It's not. So even where places where these games are being held are even more important. Even outside of that, just even being registered due to the high demand, there's more people looking at you.
Yeah. And it's a good opportunity to point out that the software that they use doesn't always get it right either. So to Humphrey's point, keep your records, document everything. That is your responsibility as a host to be doing your homework, right? So let's talk about a lot of hosts, but especially first timers, worry that we hear this anyway. They worry that when they're trying to be responsible, do things the right way, be compliant, all those things, that it can put off guests. And this is, what I just talked about with my previous presentation. But let's pretend I'm that guest. So let's pretend I am the guest who's booking for a family, multi-generational family, a group of people. I usually am that person, so it's not a stretch. I don't think we talk about this from the guest perspective enough, but what would you tell me as the guest about why it's important for a host or a manager to be doing things in a responsible way, to be following the laws and requirements and be covered in all of those things? Max, let me throw it back to you for that one first.
Yeah. So I will say, if I were a guest, the big thing, and actually there was a 2024 study done with Focusrite that stated that 92% of STR guests said it was extremely important that any short-term rental property that they considered was compliant with local laws and regulations, they would be more willing to book and felt more comfortable staying at the property just in general. So even guests themselves have spoken and said they want to make sure that the properties that they're renting are compliant and doing the right things. Because as the example Expedia talked about, there are compliance officers that will go on knock on host doors when a guest is inside the property and kick a guest out because it is not a legit rental. So even outside of that, and I'm not saying that to scare anybody, but it's even more important. I mean, if I was a guest, right, I'd want to make sure, step number one, that even the tax rate is right, that I'm not overpaying in terms of taxes. And as a host, I would think that I would want to make sure that as well, because it makes my property incompetitive inside of the entire market, as somebody in the same building as me is renting for $100 less because my tax rate is wrong. So as a guest, ensuring that everything is correct and creates a safe environment. I know Humphrey will probably hit on this. I mean, the safety elements to making sure that everything is correct. And when I'm staying there, that kind of stuff is super important to me as a guest. So especially as these larger groups and people that are international are going to be coming in, safety is going to be a priority, and making sure that everything is compliant from a permitting perspective is number one, I think, for these guests.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Humphrey, what about you?
Well, I mean, are you ready to have a little moment?
Always.
So like, I would be like, so, we want to make sure that every guest is treated fairly. So we ask every guest to verify their identity before arrival, not because we're suspicious of you specifically, but because we take our responsibility really seriously. And we don't know you, so we're inviting a stranger into our home, which we're accountable for. And verification is how we make sure that that's a safe decision for everyone, including you and including everyone who's come before you and after you. And it means that the guests who stay here know the property is protected. And, that's part of what we're asking you to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would add, if I'm, as I am that guest, if I see a host dotting their I's and crossing their T's like this in the booking process or just after booking, it makes me a lot more confident that the property is going to be taken care of and stocked just to that same level. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Ian, how about you?
I mean, like as a guest, it's like I've taken my family obviously on trips, and I have a son who's a teenager. He's a little bit clumsy, call him a little hormonal. He's not really, distracted, whatever. And then I have a 3-year-old who is completely the opposite, and she's all over the place, high energy. I like looking at descriptions, of things to look out for. It makes me feel like, they have the best intentions for me and my family. Especially with a toddler with pools, I want to know that there's safety equipment, things like that. Kind of expands the horizon in a lot of different areas. Bunk beds. Again, she's 3. She loves climbing up ladders and playing on things. Is there a safety rail? I have a brother. When I was younger, if I was on the top bunk and there's a ceiling fan, he's going to turn it on, right? And he totally would have loved to have watched me get hit by that ceiling fan. We see photos on online listings that have these things, and just the ability for the host to be consciously aware in the delivery, I guess, in the house rules. If I see the message coming across as these house rules are there to keep everyone safe, and it's not necessarily a message, for them, they're just protecting themselves. I guess I feel a little bit more open, and I feel a little more comfortable, and it feels more human in that sense. But yeah, I guess coming from that standpoint, just that human element, the stuff you said in your sprinkle method was fantastic. I loved the way that you delivered that, and that would make me feel comfortable as an insurance agent. I don't look at people with a target on their back by any means, but it's one of the last things I've never had to sue anybody. I hope I never have to, but making sure if they had the right insurance, there's a surgeon out there somewhere who could potentially break his hand at your property. And if he can't perform his duties for the rest of his life, it's coming out of your insurance, and that's a lifelong debilitating issue. So it's a very vast, question. It's so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and you perfectly teed up my next one, which is knowing that World Cup travelers are like in a huge amount bringing their kids. What are some blind spots that hosts need to be watching out for? You named a few in your previous comments, but let me stick with you for a second, Ian. What are some other blind spots or less obvious things that hosts should be looking for?
We've seen like 2-story homes where there's a basement level with egress windows. I don't know why, but we see a lot of bunk beds that block the window, and you've officially blocked that point of egress. That egress is there for safety reasons. If there's a fire, kids, families, they need to be able to get out of the property. The other one is offering toddler gear, bassinets, and things like that. I would sincerely consider, getting on the list with the manufacturers to receive any recalls. That equipment gets recalled all the time, and there's for good reason. It all comes down to statistics with what they're manufacturing, and once they get so many, it causes an issue, and it happens all the time. I know Amazon's pretty good about it. My wife and I bought a car seat a couple years ago, and it was like a year and a half later, we got a notice from Amazon, and they let us know there was a recall for it. So just be very, very aware with the baby and toddler gear that you're providing. That perspective is extremely important.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was in property management, for kid gear, baby gear, and like watercraft and bikes and all of those things that have their own set of dangers, we always outsourced to a gear rental company that was required to monitor recalls and things like that. I'm going to shout out two of our friends, Baby Quip, great. Oh, yep. Jacqueline just put it in the chat. Baby Quip is an awesome place for guests to get baby gear. And then Justin Ford at Breezeway has a great safety program. So I highly recommend checking out both of those companies. Humphrey, what about you? What are some blind spots in this area?
I mean, look, I would start with the fact that the World Cup is hopefully going to bring volume and velocity. And what that means is it's going to increase the pressure. And when you get increased pressure, it's really easy to let standards slip. So this creates like the right environment for stuff to go wrong. So like apologies to everyone, I'm gonna take it down the level. So children in the property aren't always the children of the adults. So it is uncomfortable, but there is good evidence to suggest that during major sporting events, exploitation of minors is a documented and significant risk. And it's very difficult for any of you to do anything about it, but knowing that this can happen and that there is a pattern and you need to know what you need to look for is super important. Now, the best way to do that is to listen to the previous webinar that we did because we go into quite a lot of detail there on what to look for. And yeah, that's the one that I would leave you with.
Yeah. If you were not at our kickoff event, I would highly recommend watching a replay of that because Ian's teammate, Nick, Humphrey, and Mac all go into a lot more detail on these things that we don't have time to cover today, but are still really important things to know. So Lindsay will drop in the chat in a second where you can find that replay. Highly recommend a rewatch. Matt, last question for you, and then we'll do a rapid fire to wrap it up. What are potential tax blind spots?
I kind of hit on a little bit of them earlier, right? Just knowing and understanding the registration requirements of your short-term rental before you even list it is super important. Knowing even the tax rate, something as simple as that, people might think that the tax rate is going to be the same as, their neighbor that's right across the street. Sometimes you may fall into a special taxing jurisdiction or into a different spot or your specific building, and this is crazy, but in some areas across the US, they have a specific tax rate for an HOA within a particular place. Now, that doesn't apply to everyone, and it's not broad sweeping, but it does occur. So even just knowing the tax rate is super important. Big thing I always kind of toss out whenever it comes to blind spots is just knowing and understanding what marketplaces, and marketplaces, fancy word for Airbnb, VRBO, etc., you're listing your property on, and if or what they are filing on your behalf, and if there's any leftover obligations. In a lot of places, as I mentioned earlier, Kansas City, they don't file everything for the property. So you still have a filing requirement. As well, I think something that's kind of interesting to mention is you may be just listing your property on something like VRBO or Airbnb, but the international guests, booking.com is actually quite a popular source internationally, and it's growing here within inside of the US. And as a piece of that, you might have some guests wanting to come through that specific platform. So if you list on there, Booking.com in a lot of jurisdictions does not file the applicable taxes, leaving you with everything to file. So realizing where you're listing your property and if or what they are filing on your behalf is super, super important. And like Alexa kind of mentioned, is knowing and understanding, what sites and knowing and understanding where you're listing it is super kind of important, and kind of going from there.
Yeah. So if it sounds complex and potentially a minefield of places to make some mistakes inadvertently, it can be. So we've all got to do some homework. On that note, final rapid fire. I'm going to come to Ian, then Max, and Humphrey. What is your go-to resource that you recommend to hosts who are hosting for the first time, or at least for their first big event like this? One sentence or less, Ian.
Oh man. I if I was if first time host, honestly, I would do that breezeway safety course. I would
Great tip.
I would do Justin Ford because it changes your perspective and it gets you thinking about safety. And it's extremely important, and that protects not only just you, but the STR marketplace as a whole on a national level. Because the more accidents that happen across the board, we end up with more regulations or even more outline. And so collectively as a group, if we all want to protect this entire market, we gotta start thinking to be a little bit more safe and how we can all protect each other.
Love it. So if somebody on my team could drop the safety course link in the chat, that would be great. Max and then Humphrey, go-to resources.
I would say, I hate to say it, toss Avalara, right? I would love to toss us out there. Big reason why is we have a lot of free resources on our website. You don't have to pay us. And the big thing I always kind of mention to folks is if you pick up the phone, I promise we don't bite. We can always assist in terms of answering questions, anything along those lines. But head to our website. We have resources like a compliance guide about how to kind of a checklist that walks you through it. I think the Rent Responsibly team has that. We have a free tax rate lookup tool. We have state lodging tax guides that could really help you out when it comes to even understanding what your obligations might even be.
Love it. Yeah, your tax resources are my go-to as well. Humphrey, take us home.
Alex, I love this. You've given me an open goal. Guys, it's the Rent Responsibly Network.
Aw,
You
thanks,
guys
Humphrey.
exist specifically to help hosts operate professionally and responsibly. You're here, you're doing it. So the best thing you can do is to tell anyone else who's hosting that they should be following Rent Responsibly. Um, and then maybe check out Truvi if you have a spell.
Yes, do check out Truvi. I'm gonna steal the hair toss from Max. Yes, I wasn't fishing for compliments, but I appreciate that, Humphrey. Ian, Humphrey, Max, thank you guys so much. Everybody, again, watch the replay of our last event. I am gonna throw it over to my teammate Dana now to bring up our next panel. Dana, I see you there. I know you'll be spotlit soon, so over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alexa. So we've just spent the last hour talking about regulations and insurance, guest communications, all the stuff that keeps most hosts up at night. But now we're going to talk about the thing that actually makes this industry worth being in, the people. So I'm Dana Lubner with Rent Responsibly, and today we have 4 leaders who built communities so hosts don't have to start from scratch and figure this out all alone. We've got Seb from TXSTRA in Texas, Susan from MOVHA in Missouri, Rich from AMSTRA in Atlanta, and Dennis from FAVR in Florida. 4 World Cup host cities right here on this panel. So here's what I want to give you for the next 30 minutes. I want you to get real answers and have real conversations. So I'm going to ask these 4 panelists questions, and they're going to give you the honest version, and then we'll follow that thread wherever it goes. So starting out with question 1, let's start with, what is a short-term rental association, generally speaking, for someone who might not be familiar with the term, someone brand new to hosting, or maybe even for someone who's been around for a while but hasn't discovered an organization like yours. So Dennis, we're going to start out with you. If you can go ahead and introduce your group and give us a quick elevator pitch about FAVR.
Thank you, Dana. It's great to be here today. My name is Dennis Hanks. I'm the executive director of FAVR, and the Florida Alliance for Vacation Rentals was started 32 years ago, and it was actually started because of regulations in Florida, and that's how we ended up becoming a 501c6 nonprofit organization with a lot of resources to help folks that are getting started, for those professional managers that need that weekly, monthly, annually type of resources. We have those as well. So soup to nuts, that's what we've been doing for 32 years, pretty much.
Awesome. All right, Susan, over to you next.
I'm still shocked at 32 years. We just got started 2 years ago. The Missouri Vacation Home Alliance. so a little bit of a different perspective, but we really try to clear the way for all of you all to operate your businesses without a lot of government interference, and to encourage people to rent responsibly. Just what you said, Dana, and what your whole group stands for, because the more negative things that happen, it impacts all of us. So we're there for education, we're there for advocacy, making sure that our taxes and things like that aren't putting us all out of business.
And you guys have been doing some incredible stuff over there in Missouri. All right, we've got Seb up next. Tell us about your group.
Hi, everyone. So TXSTRA is a lot younger. We're less than a year old. We're a statewide trade association for short-term rental operators in Texas, and we represent a multi-billion-dollar industry with over 80,000 listings. So TXSTRA helps hosts to navigate regulations, connect with each other, and level up how we operate. But just as importantly is what's happening behind the scenes. So TXSTRA members are showing up at City Hall meetings, shaping ordinances, or stepping in when things go too far, and to make sure that we kind of have a voice. We also connect local hosting groups across cities and help them share what works and to become more effective.
Wonderful. All right, Rich, over to you.
Thanks, Dana. So AMSTRA was formed in 2022 in response to the City of Atlanta proposing to outright ban short-term rentals. And so they ended up enacting an ordinance that it has a primary residency requirement. And so we formed AMSTRA, and we basically there to protect short-term rental owners and hosts for grandfathering rights and property rights. And we are doing advocacy not only in the city of Atlanta, but in the Atlanta metro area for a lot of the cities and counties that are enacting different short-term rental rules. And we also provide quarterly in-person meetings for updates on what's going on with the ordinance. And so the current ordinance that's in place is not being enforced. And so we are right now in the process of negotiating with the city to redo that ordinance.
Talk about a state of limbo, right? So now we know who all of our panelists are. I want to talk about why community matters, especially with the World Cup coming. So Seb, I'm going to throw this first question over to you, and then we'll go to Susan, Dennis, and Rich. My question is, large events like the World Cup can sometimes create friction with permanent residents. How are your organizations helping hosts act as good neighbors and community ambassadors, and why does that even matter?
So the reality is that hosts get blamed if something goes wrong, even if it's a guest behaving badly or criminally. So one bad listing, one negative press story can create rules basically that are going to impact or maybe even ban hosts across an entire city. So that's why it's so important. We're only as strong as the weakest kind of link. So there's a number of things that I think that hosts can do to protect themselves and to remind guests of their responsibilities. But you can also do this to actually leverage more bookings. So here's a kind of a few ideas. So a lot of hosts are scared of turning on instant bookings. We've had it at my company since day one. We'll have close to 200 listings come the World Cup. So I kind of practice what I preach every day. And we have instant booking enabled because we do our guest vetting after a booking is made. So you can use tools like Humphrey's Truvi that can help you screen your guests and to protect yourself. We also use noise monitors from Minute in all of our listings, and that notifies us if a guest is being too loud and even sends them a message at the same time. And we've already highlighted Justin Ford's safety course. So as an organization, we want to promote all these things that help to level up our hosting and to be more professional.
Fantastic. I love the examples. How about you, Susan?
So we've really leaned into host education ahead of the World Cup, including hosting 2 in-person hosting crash courses in Kansas City for both new and our experienced host. What really made these impactful was that we brought in our local regulators and political leaders to be part of the conversation because they're hearing from those residents every day. And it has really helped us deepen those relationships, and what we want to accomplish with that is minimal neighborhood impact while also allowing the local homeowners to participate in the economic opportunity this event brings. So those political leaders have really gotten behind us. It's really been a change. It matters because the long-term success of short-term rentals depends on community support. A negative experience during a high-profile event like this can quickly lead to stricter regulations that affect all of us. So we're really emphasizing that great hosting isn't just about the guest experience. It's about being a good neighbor, supporting your community, and ultimately protecting your ability to keep operating.
Well said, Susan. All right, Dennis, over to you, and then Rich will take us home with this question.
Sure, absolutely. One of the key things that we provide education on is that good neighbor policy and making sure that folks understand that when there's an event at a city commission meeting, at a state delegation meeting, or whatever it may be, you're really going to hear those bad stories about the bad actors. And it really overshadows everything else that's done well. The fact that we bring in $31 billion a year in the state of Florida for 300,000 rentals, and all those good, positive tax benefits and things are all overshadowed by the one story. It's kind of funny, back in Fort Lauderdale, I went to 5 city hearings, and at every city hearing, they said the same story. Remember the Bentley that ran into the gates at that gated community? And we heard it 5 times, but nobody got up to say, hey, these people that came from Ohio had an amazing experience here in Fort Lauderdale, and look what they said. So that's where we really need the hosts and the property managers to be more involved in. Let's tell those positive stories and get that word out there. As we'll do an annual lobby day at the Capitol where we go and meet 30 and 40 senators and state representatives, and they're the ones that will come to us. Well, you know what happened in my community? So we always want to have those good stories in our back pocket so we can say, yeah, but look at this good side of what happens in our lodging industry. So those are the important facts that we need people to tell their stories. And that's where being involved in an association really matters. I'm the paid guy. I'm going to get up and speak because that's my job. But the other 25 people in the room that are doing this for a living, retirement, income, whatever, those are the important stories we need to have an engagement on.
And I just wish that those stories, those important stories you're referencing, were more of the headlines that our industry is getting. But we know that news outlets are looking for clickbait. And unfortunately, the stuff that Susan mentioned, or one bad incident that can throw the baby out with the bathwater, is just unfortunate in reality. So the more we can do to promote these good host stories and good host best practices, the better. All right, Rich, what's your answer to this question?
Yeah, so a lot of you've touched on all the great positive points that we typically put out there for best practices. I think we've touched on the fact that unfortunately the less than 1% of the bad actors are really what causes the issues amongst disrupting neighbors and neighborhoods. And so we are a big proponent of kind of pushing reasonable regulations that encourage kind of the 3 strikes you're out policy for any kind of disruption with the neighbors, whether it's noise complaints or parking and issues like that. I personally have experienced bad hosts that have tried to do, event parties and venues right next door to me at 3, 4 in the morning. And those ordinances work that basically have the suspension trigger. And so we typically want to make sure that, if there's cities or counties that don't have regulations in place, that there's a reason why some of those reasonable regulations work to weed out some of those bad actors. And then obviously, we also encourage, whether it's a large upcoming event or if you're just putting up a brand new listing, to reach out to your neighbors, meet your neighbors, introduce yourself, let them know who the contact person is, let them know what you're doing, let them know that you have quiet time from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. and that if there's any issues to reach out to you proactively. So you don't wait to meet your neighbors on these properties that you're hosting when there's a problem that happens. You want to be very proactive and have an approach to be able to get ahead of any of those issues that might come up.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Rich, because I feel like I've been hearing for the time I've been in this industry that it's a best practice for a host to tell their neighbor they're short-term renting. And I think most people are a little bit afraid. They're like, I don't want to get a reaction I don't like. My thought is, would you rather get them calling the cops
Exactly.
on you and finding out that they don't have a direct line and they didn't know? Or would you rather have them have your direct line so that if they do have an issue with a guest were not able to foresee coming up, they can call you?
And
So I think, yeah.
you'd be surprised that many times that ends up leading to ahead of the holidays. They have extra family coming. They need somewhere to stay. So they reach out to you directly and do a direct booking. So it's very productive to kind of be forthright with what's going on. So
I love that you brought that up, Rich. All right, so we've just talked about the neighbor piece. Let's zoom out into your specific markets because every World Cup is in a different place. And I want folks here at this event to walk away with some real and specific things. So we're going to start out with you, Rich. What are the most important things every host in your host city or cities need to know as we approach the tournament? How is your association helping them navigate those things?
yeah, we've recently, AMSTRA a few weeks ago had one of our in-person meetings to update our members and new hosts that want to learn more about what's coming up with the World Cup. We had our friend Jamie Lane, who's the economist for AirDNA, talk about the statistics as far as what you should be pricing your property at. What is the minimum stay you should be setting that at? And then obviously we had some of our board members that spoke firsthand about how they were preparing some of their listings to be very specific to the event and catering to international travelers, and the importance of essentially identifying in your listing title and description, where you are located in relation to the stadium. A lot of us that have access to public transportation, it's important to note how far away you are from that public transportation. Some of those properties that are in close proximity, walking distance to Mercedes-Benz, for example, obviously you want to point those things out. So we really want to arm the community with having the best approach of how to be prepared for this. Unfortunately, there's a lot of hosts that aren't really aware of what's going on, so they've got their pricing not really set or engaged for that. And so we look at it as being able to kind of provide some guidance and answer any questions about sharing them with a lot of what our board members and some of our experienced members are doing. We've prepared for other large events like the Super Bowl, so this is not, our first rodeo, so to speak. And so we kind of help folks navigate and be able to have some of those decisionings. And then, the most important thing, obviously, is being fully prepared. You don't want to just have a brand new listing that's going to cause an issue. Ahead of the Super Bowl, we had a big surge of new listings that weren't prepared properly. So we had a lot of cancellations last minute that would transfer because they weren't happy with the property when they showed up. And so it's very important to make sure that you're doing the correct things as a host as well ahead of these large events.
Excellent examples. All right, same question to you, Susan.
So my number one in Kansas City is be sure that you are doing it legally. We got into the same issue that Rich mentioned in his city where we got regulated because so many were not following the rules, weren't becoming compliant. So call your city first. We have so many multiple municipalities here and everyone is different. Then educate yourself on best practices. Our hosting crash course is recorded. You can still purchase that. You can Rent Responsibly has great free resources. I read through your your World Cup hosting essentials. That is fabulous. So take some kind of a class, read through some information. Our hosting crash courses and Rent Responsibly's information. It will cover pricing, regulations, how to be a good neighbor, how to get 5 stars reviews, cleaning, insurance, safety, taxes, and more. There's just so much information there. Take advantage of it.
Awesome. All right, Seb, over to you.
Yeah, so there's a lot of excitement about demand and opportunity. But what we've been telling hosts is treat this like a real business from day one. Maybe put up the listing a little bit early, way before the World Cup, so you can work out kind of kinks and other issues. Because the reality is, some of the people coming are literally remortgaging their homes to afford the trip. And hosting someone is a serious responsibility. The days of taking a few iPhone pics and throwing it up online are over. Like the standard of hosting gets higher and higher every year in each market. What we've seen in kind of major events in other cities, such as the Olympics in Paris, is that a lot of hosts and even hotels got very aggressive on their rates. And so a lot of people weren't getting booked. If you've got a brand new listing with no reviews and your rates are too high, you're not going to get booked. They're going to book the listing with a lot of reviews, even if it's more expensive potentially. So try and see what the market's like. one of some of the discussions that we've had in meetups is considering your kind of guest avatar. Who are the people coming from the different countries that your city is hosting? In a city like Houston, where I live, for example, it's really easy to meet people from all over the world and ask them about what someone from Holland or Portugal or Saudi is like and looking for. So consider that in your listing and see if you can kind of stand out. And one more thing also is that Dallas and Houston, they're cities that already have a lot of demand in the summer from interns. So consider, are you trying to just make a lot of money on a few nights, or are you looking at that whole period? Trying to maybe get longer term bookings for either people already coming to the city as part of business as usual, or people connected to the World Cup. And again, adapt your listings to that.
So many great practical tips, Sebastian. I love it. All right, Dennis, over to you.
Sure, we did a kickoff in Miami for our live event that we did down there. That was really our FIFA World Cup training session kickoff, smart hosting. And I think we've done maybe 5 or 6 webinars so far, and we've got probably 4 or 5 more to go. So focusing on different topics all the way through the education process, because Florida is so unique. But we're also focusing on not only the Hard Rock Stadium Miami games for the Cup, but also the training areas, because from Orlando, Tampa, Palm Beach, Boca, all those areas are going to have training games with those teams that are practicing. So we're probably going to see some surges throughout the state in those areas. So it's really looking at all the regulatory things that people need to know in those cities and counties there, because it's changing. As they mentioned earlier in one of the other presentations, you can go across the street basically in Miami and it'll be a different set of regulations. So you got to be really cautious about that and what you need to do. There's a lot of prohibitions. The state license is one where you've got to really be careful how many times you're renting, which will then trigger a state license or not a state license. Human trafficking awareness training. We know that human trafficking is prominent around big sporting events like this. In Florida, it's mandatory. You have to have it every year. It's free. FAVR offers that through our stuff. But another thing that you just need to be aware of, because it's $1,000 fine per day if you don't have that certificate. So people just need to know that that's out there, and we're offering those services.
That's incredible. There is a lot to keep up with. Even if you're someone who's been hosting for years, that's the value that a short-term rental association brings to the community. So, Dennis, you've kind of teed us up perfectly for our next question here. Susan, I'm going to start out with you. So, the World Cup is an event we're focusing on today, but your association focuses on year-round success for hosts and operators. How can hosts benefit from groups like yours long after this influx? How do you help them run a successful business through all the ups and downs of hosting and tourism?
So we've got a lot of ongoing educational opportunities. We host webinars. We have our annual education day and lobby day at the state capitol. We try to keep track of local ordinances. Those go quick. Those are going very quickly. We're partnering with other groups in the state, the realtors. We're deepening relationships to create a whole coalition to protect our interests as they overlap with other groups. So those are just some of the ways. We have a monthly local meetup here in Kansas City that hosts can take advantage of and just get to know each other and network and learn new things.
Awesome. All right, Dennis, how about you?
So we've seen some studies where it's showing that brand new hosts coming on to FIFA World Cup hosting are probably going to continue to host well after the games are over. So that 47% mark is huge for us. So we're really gearing up our education more than we have it now, so that those new hosts are going to get all these resources, because we just don't want to be caught with a black eye. I sit on the state regulatory licensing authority commission, so I'm kind of in the thick of it when it comes to that, and I want to make sure that we're making sure everybody's doing what needs to be done. I did post in the chat a guide for folks that are in Florida, which covers all the main points of what's needed at the state level. But looking far beyond FIFA World Cup, we're expecting the inventory to continue to grow, and we're going to make sure we grow with that inventory and change things up along the way, both on advocacy, but also on the education and training part of it.
Both matter. All right, Rich, over to you.
Yeah, so we've definitely, been very engaged with what's going on in Atlanta in terms of lobbying efforts. We used to have a full-time lobbying team. We work very closely with Airbnb's policy team as well. But we definitely want to make sure that our members have access to be aware of not only just stuff in Atlanta in general, but there's different neighborhoods within Atlanta that are doing or trying to propose different things that directly negatively impact short-term rentals. And so it's an ongoing effort to make sure that it's an awareness thing that we are present at some of those meetings that occur to make sure that we have a voice. We've had over the last 18 months a big success of our members showing up at these hearings and being able to kind of voice our opinion about what's going on. We've also been successful with some of the other outlying cities and counties like DeKalb County, the city of Decatur, for example, of being able to have a voice and a say-so in their rulemaking process as well. Unfortunately, a lot of the outlying jurisdictions typically look and see what the larger cities are doing and then just kind of adopt a similar approach. And so we're constantly at war with that process. And so going forward, that is a big part of our initiative, not only in Atlanta, but some of the surrounding areas as well. And then we also do webinars and in-person meetings for educating best practices and being able to help and have service providers as options to our members that can help their businesses grow as well. So we look forward to kind of continuing to do that going forward.
Oh, that's all? That was a pretty impressive list. All right, Seb, take us home on this last question, and then we've got just a few minutes left for rapid fire. So, Seb, tell us about what your group is doing beyond just events like this World Cup event.
Yeah, so a lot of the value of an association is invisible until you need it. It's the ordinance that didn't get passed, the rule that got changed or clarified, the enforcement that got pushed back. And so a lot of what we do is connecting hosts across cities so they can share what's working and influence the outcomes instead of just reacting to them. We're also driving local groups and chapters, especially where they don't exist already, so that you can meet people in person. And at the same time, we want to deliver value to our members, best practices, connections, resources. And at TXSTRA, we're also working on some member benefits that could save you some money.
Fantastic. I love the network effect you're building in Texas. It's so impressive to watch. All right. So, like I said, rapid fire. We're going to keep this rapid fire in one sentence or less. Seb, we're starting with you first. What's the one thing you'd encourage attendees to do this week or even today?
Treat this like a real business. It's not a one-off get-rich opportunity. Your guests are spending a lot of money, and you're representing our industry and city, so no pressure.
Wow, no pressure. Right. Rich, over to you.
Yeah, I would say most definitely, pay attention to your pricing. There's a lot of folks that might be priced a little too high and aren't getting any inquiries. And so you've really got to keep your eye on that on a day-to-day basis, especially with us having full knowledge of when the games are around those dates. And so you've really got to pay close attention to that. It's not just simply, putting a listing up and forgetting about it. You've got to constantly monitor that on a weekly basis ahead of the event.
Great point. Susan?
I'd say for new hosts, definitely get yourself educated. Either get the free readiness kit from Rent Responsibly or go to hostingcrashcourse.com and take a look at what we have available there for you all.
Awesome. All right, Dennis?
I think relying on associations that have a lot of professional training is the most important thing. Where people usually go astray is they're relying on Google University and Facebook University to grow their business. Treat it right, be professional.
All right. I don't know if you can hear me, but my face is frozen, which is perfect timing for us to end this panel. So the World Cup is going to bring a lot of new people into this space. Some of them are right here watching today. You don't have to figure this out alone. You just heard from a handful of panelists that have tons of free resources, lots of resources dropped into the chat. Thank you so much to our panelists. Cannot say enough how impressive it is to see the work that you're doing. And without further ado, Alexa, over to you.
Thanks, Dana, and thank you to all those amazing alliance leaders. As I hope everybody is starting to see by now, every single one of these sessions and topics, we are really just scratching the surface, and there is so much more to learn, so many more resources to access. So please, we will send around all of the links that we've been sharing today. Please connect with these organizations and these partners, and all of the things that we're going to send you, just to make sure you have all the tools in your toolbox that you possibly can. With that, let me throw it over to our final speaker, my teammate Blythe, who is going to talk to us about marketing and bringing guests back after the game. Blythe, take it away.
Thanks, Alexa. I am Rent Responsibly's Director of Marketing. And as Alexa said, I'm going to talk to us about July 20th, 2026. So we've spent the last 100-ish minutes talking about the how, the trends, the regulations, and the logistics of hosting during the 2026 World Cup. I want to talk about the day after the final whistle blows. For any new hosts, you've just completed your first major event. And then for our experienced operators, you've just managed your busiest month ever. So the question is, was this a one-time transaction or was this the start of a 10-year business relationship? Today, we're going to ensure it's the latter by mastering guest retention. Our goal is to transform every World Cup traveler into a fan and ultimately into a lifetime customer. Let me show you the 4-stage journey we're targeting. So we're going to think of this as a funnel. Step 1 in the funnel is your one-time visitor. World Cup travelers are going to cost between 15 to 25% to acquire. At stage 2, this is where you're going to perfect that first stay. You've heard a lot of tips and tricks throughout this entire presentation. This is your foundation. If you fail here, nothing else is going to matter. Step 3 is your return visitor. This is the engaged fan who's booking direct. There's an 80% retention potential. This is where the economics really start to work in your favor. And then at step 4, you have a brand advocate. There's a $0 cost to acquire. They're booking repeat stays and they're getting you referrals. I've put this call out on the bottom because this is your biggest opportunity. The stage 2 to 3 conversion. Most hosts are doing great getting those 5-star reviews, but they're failing to turn that satisfaction into action. Remember that a 5% retention could equal a 20% profit increase. That's where the money's at. Before we talk about bringing guests back, let's talk about protecting your reputation. So Alexa shared some great tips earlier on guest communications. Use those resources. I highly suggest you get back into the slide deck, look at what she talked about, pull up all those resources that we shared, and then let's put those into action to help drive better guest experience and better guest reviews. 92% of travelers are reading reviews before they're booking. Your online reputation is your business model. I've broken this down into 4 pillars. The first is your review response strategy. I've got the clock icon here. You should be responding to every review within 24 hours, every single one. So the 5-star reviews are getting a thank you. The 3-star reviews are getting acknowledgement and resolution. And any 1-star reviews, we're responding to those professionally. We're taking it offline and we're fixing the problem. The second is rating protection. This is the shield. You want to address negative feedback proactively. If something went wrong during the stay, don't wait for the review. Reach out immediately, offer resolution, and then turn that potential 1-star into a 5-star recovery story. The third is the social proof building. This is the star. So you're going to showcase your best reviews everywhere: social media, your direct booking sites, your email signatures, your check-in welcome messages. And a bonus here is if you can get user-generated content from your guests and you can share that. Ask for testimonials, build that credibility. The fourth is just online presence management. So it's the platforms, keeping your Google My Business updated, optimizing your OTAs with fresh photos. If you have a direct booking site, again, making sure those reviews are front and center. Your reputation is your retention engine. Protect it like your business depends on it, because it does. Let's talk about guest communication best practices. So this is your tactical playbook for that stage 2 to 3 conversion. I highlighted like a review goal across the top of each. So day 1, you're looking for a review goal. Within 2 hours of checkout, you want to send a message, something like, We hoped you enjoyed creating new memories. Thank you for staying with us. You want to get that 5-star review. This is really important because this is your golden window. At 2 hours post checkout, the guest is likely in an Uber or at the airport. They're still high on the trip experience. If you wait 24 hours, they're back to reality, back to emails, back to laundry, and the magic of travel is gone. Use that 2-hour window to capture the emotion. At week 1, your goal should be repeat booking. Sending something that's, we noticed you loved the balcony view, here's 10% off your next stay. Convert the interest into commitment, and including a personalized hook here so it just doesn't sound generic. Mention a specific detail that they shared with you during their stay, such as the view that they loved or a coffee shop that they visited. It's going to prove that you're not a bot, you're a host. At month 1, your goal should really be about referrals. Fall is beautiful here. Check out these local events. You want to build your referral engine. For international travelers specifically, they typically only see cities during a mega event. So use the 1-month checkpoint to show them what the city looks like when the crowds are gone. Fall is beautiful here isn't just a line, it's an invitation to a completely different, quieter experience. And then ongoing, your goal is just loyalty. So sending quarterly or yearly checkouts, something like, it's been a year, come back and see what's new. Build that lifetime value. Every email within your communication playbook should pass the so what test. If you aren't providing a discount, a local tip, or a memory, don't send it. We want to stay top of mind, not in the spam folder. Execute this sequence and that 5% retention target will become achievable. Again, the goal with follow-up comms is to stay top of mind without overwhelming. Make sure that each touch point is adding value. Let's talk quickly on the foundation. This is that step 2, the flawless operations. And all of our Alliance hosts did a great job of mentioning this in the panel. So right now is a key time. The World Cup starts in June, summer heat's coming, and equipment failures are going to kill retention. So your April action items should really look like all of those preventative maintenance, servicing your ACs, inspecting appliances. Also finalizing any readiness QA, testing your Wi-Fi, stocking essentials, verifying compliance. You really want to be guest ready by May 1st. You have 2 weeks to get there still, so don't skip the April maintenance. It's going to be the difference between a 5-star review and lost customers. This is my favorite slide because it's the data slide, so let's talk about the numbers. 30 to 40% of short-term rental guests are repeat customers. This is real industry data. It's 15 to 20 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than to retain a past one. That first booking, you're looking at 15 to 25% platform fees. With a return guest, it could cost you 0% to acquire them. The goal of the first stay should be to let the platform do the marketing for you. But the goal of the second stay is to move that guest to your direct booking site. For experienced managers, a 5% retention could look like a 20% profit margin increase. And for new hosts, this is how you can start to build a real business. To stand out and drive that stage 2 to 3 conversion, you have to move from being a bed provider to a destination ambassador. Alexa set us up with some great tips during her presentation earlier around preventable headaches, and I've provided you some more here. Let's talk first about energy optimization. Direct your guests to those official resources that we've talked about throughout this entire series. You'll be able to find match schedules, fan festivals, transit information on sites that will auto-update for you so you don't have to maintain them. If you download your city's specific host readiness kits that we've talked about multiple times throughout this presentation, we've outlined those resources for you so you don't need to try to find them yourselves if you're not sure where they're at. Second, provide the survival essentials. Think about the guest that's coming in from London, for instance. They don't just need Wi-Fi, they need reliable Wi-Fi so that they can stream games back home and they can talk to their families. Put yourself into the mind of the traveler. Provide those extra trash bins and extra recycling bins for post-match celebrations. Provide universal adapters, stock coffee, stock laundry detergent, all of these essentials. It's going to cost you $50 to $100 up front, but it's going to generate 5-star reviews. And then last, reduce friction. Offer jet lag friendly check-in options, early check-in or late checkout for guests arriving from overseas. Provide a transit cheat sheet, subway maps, train schedules, rideshare pickup zones. Create a late night food map for when a match ends at 10 p.m. and they're hungry. Most kitchens are closing at 10 p.m. So if you can provide them a list of 2 to 3 spots that serve food within 10 a.m. and are closely located to your short-term rental, you might have just saved their night. This is the local legend experience. When you anticipate these friction points of international travel, the jet lag, the language barriers, the transit confusion, the cultural differences, you're creating an experience that they just can't get at a Marriott. And here's the key. This is the story they're going to tell. This is what they're going to post on social media. This is what they're going to tell their friends. And this is why they're going to come back. This is how you become a property that World Cup travelers recommend to everyone they know. So my final takeaways and 2 priority action items for you. Takeaway number 1, that stage 2 to 3 conversion is your biggest opportunity. Turn your satisfied guests into repeat visitors. Takeaway number 2 is that a 5% retention can equal a 20% profit increase, and that should be your target. Takeaway number 3, execute the communications playbook now, the day 1, the week 1, the month 1, and the ongoing communications. Your priority actions, priority action number 1, complete all of your April preventative maintenance. And priority action number 2, get that launch day follow-up sequence ready. Test out what you want those thank you messages to look like and how to ask for those reviews. Remember, you don't want to just host a fan, you want to host a future regular. That's your mission, and that's how you can turn the World Cup into a 10-year revenue stream.
Thanks, Blythe. Oh man, again, I really miss my days as a property manager, director of marketing. Again, if you didn't watch the kickoff event that we had a few weeks ago, I did a session on sports tourism data, and the sports tourism segment of travelers they have a really high propensity of going back to a destination that they went to for a sporting event and or referring that destination and likely their accommodations to other people as well. So heavy plus sign on everything Blythe just said. Every guest experience is not just that one stay. It has the potential for many other stays after that one. So definitely bookmark all of that. Definitely follow what Blythe just laid out. But with that wraps up all of our planned programming for this particular event. We have a couple minutes. If anybody wants to drop some additional questions in the chat, we've still got some of our other speakers here answering some questions. I'll share my screen so I can point out some additional resources for you. Oh, and now I lost you. There you are. All right, let me open the chat here. While I wrap up, again, last call for questions. If I can answer some now, I will. Otherwise, we will find the resources for you and make sure you get your questions answered. First up, I want to thank our Game On partners and all the speakers that we had here today. Expedia Group, Proper Insurance, Avalara, Truvi, all of the associations that were represented here today. Please check them out. We're not just slinging products. We are recommending very, very valuable, helpful resources that everybody needs to look into, especially around the World Cup, if not every stay all year long. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. Here are 3 things I would point you to. Number 1, we've mentioned them. Download your host readiness kit. If you go to gameon2026.rentresponsibly.org, you'll see a drop down for all the host cities. Go to your city's page. There's resources on that page, but also download your kit. We've got checklists you can fill out. We've got more copy and paste stuff in there for you, even more resources, and a timeline to follow that Blythe touched on for getting ready leading up to the World Cup, what you should be doing now versus 1 month, 2 months from now. Please stay connected with us wherever you are on social. we probably are hanging out there too. So find us, follow us, engage with us, send us your questions, send us your comments, and keep an eye out for more resources that we'll just continue to share over time to and through the World Cup. And then final plug, really important one, go find your local alliance. Either if your area is represented by one of the ones here today, please join them. There's membership options for everybody. If you're not in one of those areas, look at our alliance map. There is probably an alliance for you, an association for you. They are the best places to network with other hosts in your area, get some very hyper local resources, ask questions that people can answer way better than I ever could or anybody on Rent Responsibly ever could, and all sorts of things like that. So I'm not seeing any additional questions. If we didn't get to answer yours today, we will send it to the right person. But for now, I will set everybody free a few minutes early. Thank you again for being here.